was born at Frankfurt on the Main on the 20th of November, 1809. From an early age, I was a great reader. In my father's store, I found, of course, a large collection of books, and the hours not given to studying my lessons or to playing were spent in all sorts of miscellaneous reading, fairy tales, but more so travels and later on novels. Gustave Koerner, Memoirs.
His father was operator of a bookstore, and books were repressed at that time. This is the end of the Napoleonic era, and Koerner grows up in this environment of oppressive government. So he becomes active as a university student in the Burschenschaft student group. He's wounded in this attempt to take over the police station. He has to leave, and he knows that they're looking for him and all the others who participated in it. He eventually ends up at Le Havre, France, and meets the Friedrich Engelmann party, who are coming to America, and his friend Theodore Engelmann is in that group. So they leave 1833 and arrive in New York.
They came to St. Louis first, as was their goal, and then realized that Missouri was a slave state. They were, in a sense, freedom fighters in Germany, and when they came to the United States, they did not want to tolerate slavery. So they crossed the river and came to Belleville in Illinois. They acquired a farm in the Shiloh Valley and lived there for several years.
Our life on the upper farm was really a romantic one. American and German neighbors called frequently. As Dr. George and I spoke English pretty plain, as the Americans said, we soon got well acquainted with our American neighbors.
He married one of the Engelmann women, a young lady named Sophie Engelmann, who was his roommate's sister.
At last, the sun rose on our wedding day. It was one of the most beautiful summer days. The ceremony did not take more than about 5 minutes.
So he decides to get into law. His English is not so good, and his understanding of American law. So he goes to Kentucky to take a kind of a short refresher sort of a course. And in that process, he meets Mary Todd, who later will marry Abraham Lincoln. He does about a year there. He comes back. He then astutely joins the law firm of Adam Snyder, who is a candidate for governor. He begins his law practice, gets involved in politics, is elected to the state legislature. He's the first German-born member of that body. After that, he's becomes well-known and is nominated for lieutenant governor. Within 12 years of arriving here, he is appointed to the Illinois State Supreme Court. So that's a pretty fast track for an immigrant who didn't have a real grasp of the language when he got here. While he's on the Illinois Supreme Court, he hears Lincoln argue cases before them. And he, begins to think this is kind of an interesting guy, and I want to see what he's going to do on this question of slavery.
In fact, he did work his entire life to eliminate the institution of slavery and fought against the expansion of slavery into the territories. And that's what brought him in very close contact with Abraham Lincoln.
So they team up. They formed the Illinois Republican Party in 1856. Lincoln comes to town here in October of 1856 for day-long speeches. Well, they were in the afternoon and again in the evening. And Koerner is taking him around to some Republican families to introduce him.
Pretty early in the canvass, Mr. Lincoln came down to Belleville. He spoke in an almost conversational tone, but with such earnestness and such deep feeling upon the question of the day that he struck the hearts of all his hearers.
Koerner was kind of his lookout guy down here, and they send each other letters. What's the latest going on down there? Was Douglas down your way? Stephen A. Douglas, Lincoln's opponent. And Lincoln seems especially concerned about Madison, and he asked at one point, could we get Friedrich Hecker, who was a hero from 1848 in Germany and had influence with German immigrants. How about having him speak for me?
I will speak to Mr. Hecker about his coming up to Springfield, but, and this is strictly between ourselves, I am not inclined to think that his presence will do much good. At least this is my experience. While well calculated to animate friends, he cannot conciliate opponents, and amongst the Catholics and even Orthodox Protestants, he is considered as the very Antichrist. Gustave Koerner, letter to Abraham Lincoln, July 17, 1858.
Campaign for Lincoln, campaign for other Republican candidates, speaking to large crowds in English and in German, helping to encourage them to support Lincoln and the Republican ticket.
Dear Sophie, Lincoln is president. In the presence of at least 10,000 people, he took the oath and read with a firm voice his inaugural. I stood close to his chair. Next to me stood Douglas. Gustave Koerner, Washington, March 4th, 1861.
He was appointed minister to Spain in the Lincoln administration. He was then stationed in Madrid for, I believe, 2 years, returning home in '64.
I had always looked upon Spain as a highly interesting country politically and besides as a land of romance and song. But notwithstanding this, I should have preferred some other mission. Not that I wanted more leisure than Spain would give me, but I supposed, and it turned out very correctly, that the expense of living at Madrid was far higher than that at Berlin or Vienna, where the salary of the ministers was the same as in Spain.
He sees Lincoln in December of 1864 and finds that he is beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel as far as the Civil War, and he said he was in better spirits than he thought he had been before.
On the 15th of April, the day after Good Friday, I left my house for my office about 8 o'clock in the morning. When I reached Main Street, I was surprised that the people were closing their stores and that the Union flag hung at half-mast. Some houses were already draped with black crape. Lincoln is dead. Lincoln has been assassinated, was heard through the streets. Somewhat to my surprise, I learned by the papers that I had been appointed pallbearer. I said surprise because of the 12 gentlemen elected, I was the only one not from Springfield. Mr. Seward had said of Mr. Lincoln that he was the best man he ever knew. I should rather say he was the justest man I ever knew.
In the 1872 election, he ran for governor. A group of the Republicans had split from their party and referred to themselves as liberal Republicans because they were reacting against the corruption of the Grant administration in the 1870s. And so he ran on the liberal Republican ticket in 1872 for governor. Of course, did not win the race and retired to practicing law alone.
One of the things that Sophie is known for is the Turnverein comes to Belleville in the 1850s. That's a German fitness, a strong body, a strong mind kind of a thing. They believe in exercise, but also education. And then out of that, in some later years, comes the kindergarten movement for young children. And the Germans who were showing up here were educated. They were university people, and they introduced the idea of a kindergarten for young children. And Sophie is in the lead on that movement in about 1874, I think it is. And it's not part of the regular school system, so they have to raise money to put on this program, and that's the way it goes for several years until there's more public acceptance of funding education.
The 50th wedding anniversary of Gustave and Sophie was celebrated here on the property over 2 days. There were immense crowds of well-wishers who came out to congratulate them and wrote songs, and his grandchildren were involved in the celebration.
These days might be called the culminating point of our lives. I feel now what Goethe said at one period of his long life. Der Mensch erlebt, was sein immer mag, sein letztes Glück und seinen letzten Tag. All humans, be they who they may, experience a last happiness and a last day.
This was their only house that they owned, ever. The house had been divided into 4 efficiency apartments. The tenants were moved out, and we began to deconstruct the apartments. We had to remove all the modern materials that had been put in place in about 1985. In this front room, we had some termite damage to the floor joist. There was some instability in the foundation. So our team of architect engineers worked to stabilize the foundation, first of all, and our carpenters took this floor up and sistered in floor joists. We worked on the exterior first so that people could see progress. We had to have the lead paint abated on the exterior, so we had men in moon suits taking the loose paint off and applying a fresh coat of paint to the exterior masonry. We wanted to establish the look of the 1870s. A couple years ago, we replaced the roof and rebuilt the chimneys. Right now we're in the design phase of replacing the side porch. It's not original to the property, and it's in very bad condition.
You rely on experts. You have to. You can't know everything, so you do hire somebody to put together a historic structure report. We're working with an architect now on the back porch, and we'll be working with an architect on the interior here, but there are so many details involved in doing something like this. Belleville's 210 years old. Koerner's time here is a good portion of that. And in this 210 years, we have, first of all, the Germans coming, the immigration, the effect they have on Southwest Illinois, the issue of slavery, which Koerner is involved in and fighting. We have the Civil War era period that, again, Koerner is involved in. So we have these themes, but also it's the history of Belleville. So all of those are what we're trying to interpret, and what we would intend in the future, perhaps to have small discussion groups here, displays, pictures of that period of time. As far as I know, there's really no other place in this town that explains the history of Belleville.